Of course. Karen stepped aside, her mind racing. She led them to the living room, where everything was precisely arranged. Throw pillows fluffed, coffee table books aligned, not a speck of dust anywhere. Control was her comfort zone. Dave cleared his throat. Karen, I think you know why we're here. I assume this is about the unfortunate incident at the pool. Karen settled into her leather armchair, the one that positioned her slightly higher than her guests. I was actually planning to address it at this evening's emergency board meeting. Emergency meeting? Melissa's eyebrows shot up. Karen, you scheduled an emergency meeting without consulting the board? I sent the notice at 7 this morning. Check your email. Karen's smile never wavered, but inside, panic was setting in. She'd fired off that email in desperation, hoping to control the narrative before anyone could corner her like this. This is serious, Karen. Dave leaned forward. You've violated at least 3 HOA regulations. Improper disposal of organic waste, contamination of common property, and, he consulted his notes, failure to follow proper procedures for pool maintenance scheduling. I'm well aware of our regulations, David. I wrote most of them. Then you know what happens next. Melissa opened her folder with shaking hands. We have to issue you a formal violation notice. And given my position, Karen interrupted, I think we can handle this internally. It was clearly a misunderstanding. Dave's laugh was sharp. A misunderstanding? Karen, you dumped leaves in the pool for 20 minutes. The footage shows you checking your watch, like you were timing it. Karen's composure cracked for just a moment. That's enough. I'm still the president of this board, and I won't be spoken to like some common rule breaker. Actually, Melissa said quietly, that's what we need to discuss. There's going to be a vote of no confidence. The words hit Karen like a physical blow. She'd spent 15 years building this kingdom, enforcing order in a world of chaos. The Willowbrook Estates HOA was her legacy, her purpose, her identity. Without it, who was she? I see. Karen stood slowly, her back ramrod straight. Well then, I suppose we'll let democracy take its course. But I want you both to remember something. I've kept this neighborhood running smoothly for 15 years. I've protected property values, maintained standards, and dealt with problems you couldn't handle. One moment of poor judgment doesn't erase all of that. Dave and Melissa exchanged glances. Karen, Dave said gently, maybe it's time to consider stepping down voluntarily. Save everyone the embarrassment of a public vote. Karen's smile returned, but this time it was different, sharper, more dangerous. Embarrassment? Oh, David, you haven't seen anything yet. If this neighborhood wants to question my judgment, they're welcome to try. But they might not like what they discover about themselves in the process. After they left, Karen sat alone in her perfect living room, staring at her phone. The video had been viewed 91 times now. But as she watched herself dumping those leaves, she remembered something she'd almost forgotten in all the panic. Why she'd done it in the first place. The Hendersons. Their late-night pool parties. The noise complaints she'd filed that were mysteriously lost. The way they'd smirked at her during the last board meeting when she'd brought up the issue. Maybe it was time the perfect neighborhood learned that even Karen Whitmore had her limits. Karen Whitmore stood frozen in her kitchen, staring at her phone screen with the same expression she'd worn when she discovered her husband's affair 3 years ago. The video had been shared in the Willowbrook Estates WhatsApp group at 6:47 a.m., and by 7:15, it had been viewed 43 times. The timestamp read yesterday, 11:42 p.m. There she was, captured in perfect high definition by Mrs. Chen's new security camera, dumping armfuls of soggy autumn leaves directly into the community pool. Her silver hair caught the moonlight as she made trip after trip from the landscaping bins to the pool's edge, her movements methodical and deliberate. Shit, she whispered, then immediately looked around her empty kitchen, as if someone might report her for profanity. After 15 years, as the Willowbrook Estates HOA president, Karen had never been caught breaking a single rule. She was the rule enforcer, the fine issuer, the woman who measured grass heights with a ruler and documented Christmas decorations that stayed up past January 2nd. Her phone buzzed. Then again, and again. Is this really Karen Whitmore? Jennifer from Maple Lane. OMG, the irony. Miss Perfect finally gets caught. Anonymous number. Someone's been sending out violation notices for leaf debris all month. Tom Rodriguez. Karen's perfectly manicured fingers trembled as she scrolled through the messages. 27 unread texts and counting. She'd worked too hard building her reputation as the neighborhood's moral authority to watch it crumble over a stupid moment of, what had it even been? Revenge? Justice? A complete mental breakdown? The doorbell rang. Through her front window's sheer curtains, she could see Melissa Parks from the HOA board, shifting nervously on her doorstep, clutching a manila folder. Behind her stood Dave Thornton, the vice president, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Karen smoothed her pearl gray cardigan, checked her reflection in the hallway mirror, and opened the door with the same confident smile she'd perfected for countless board meetings. "Good morning, Melissa." "Dave." Her voice was steady, professional. "Rather early for a house call, isn't it?" Melissa's usual nervous giggle was absent. "Karen, we need to talk. May we come in?" "You mean you'd actually want to serve on committees? Attend meetings? Deal with contractors and city officials and residents who think fence heights are a matter of personal freedom?" "We mean," Robert said, "maybe we could try being neighbors instead of just residents." Karen looked at each of them, and the vote of no confidence. "Withdrawn," Melissa said, unanimously. "And the violation notices?" "We'll work out payment plans," Dave said. "Bring everything up to code properly. The right way." Karen nodded slowly. "There's one more thing. Mrs. Chen, I owe you an apology. And not just for the leaves." Mrs. Chen looked puzzled. "For what?" "For the business license investigation. I requested it years ago, but never followed through. When I was angry about the video, Karen took a deep breath. "I called the city Monday morning. I'm the reason they came to your house." The silence stretched uncomfortably. "I can't undo it," Karen continued. "But I know people in city planning. I can help you navigate the appeals process. Get your license reinstated properly." Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of being the person who breaks things when she's angry. I want to be the person who fixes them." As the delegation left, Karen sat on her front porch watching the sun set over Willowbrook Estates. Tomorrow, she'd start making phone calls about Mrs. Chen's business license. She'd schedule a community meeting to discuss reasonable pool policies. She'd find a way to help Robert rebuild his pool house to code. But tonight, she allowed herself a small smile as she remembered the satisfying splash of those leaves hitting the water. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the video. Honestly, about time someone shook things up around here. Welcome to the human race, Karen Whitmore." She typed back, "Thank you, though I still expect your grass to be regulation height." The response came immediately. "Yes, ma'am. But maybe we could discuss those regulations sometime. Over coffee?" New neighbor, 247 Oak Street. Karen stared at the message. A new neighbor who'd moved in during her week of crisis. Someone who'd seen her at her worst moment and still wanted to have coffee. Maybe it was time to discover who Karen Whitmore could be when she wasn't constantly enforcing everyone else's boundaries. She typed, "Coffee sounds lovely, but fair warning, I have very strong opinions about proper lawn maintenance. Looking forward to it. I have strong opinions about pool maintenance, as it turns out." Karen laughed. Actually laughed, for the first time in weeks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new rules to enforce, new messes to clean up. But tonight, she was just a woman who'd made a spectacular mistake and somehow found her way back to being human. Though she'd never admit it to anyone, she was already planning her next small act of rebellion. The Christmas decoration policy could use some flexibility. Karen spent the morning doing what she did best: research. Her home office, a converted bedroom with filing cabinets organized by street name and violation type, had become her war room. 15 years of HOA documentation, complaint forms, and resident files spread across her desk like a general's battle plans. The emergency board meeting was set for 7 p.m., And by 5 o'clock, Karen had armed herself with enough dirt to bury half the neighborhood. She'd started with the obvious targets: Dave Thornton's unpermitted deck extension from 2019, which she documented but never officially reported; Melissa Park's repeated violations of the no commercial vehicles rule when her daughter's food truck visited every Sunday. Small infractions she'd overlooked in the spirit of community cooperation. But the deeper she dug, the more interesting things became. The Hendersons, her original targets, had been more creative than she'd realized. Property tax records showed they'd been claiming their pool house as a storage shed to avoid permit fees. Their architect's plans, which she'd requested through a public records inquiry, revealed the structure was clearly designed for entertaining. Karen's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, Robert Henderson. "Karen, we need to talk." His usually confident voice sounded strained. "Good afternoon, Robert. I assume you're calling about tonight's meeting." "Look, what happened with the pool? That was just a misunderstanding, right? Some kind of maintenance issue." Karen almost laughed. "A misunderstanding? Yes, that's an interesting way to put it. Listen, I know we've had our differences about the noise thing, but there's no need for this to get ugly. Maybe we can work something out." "Work something out?" Karen's voice remained perfectly pleasant. "What did you have in mind?" A pause. "The board meeting tonight. Maybe you could postpone it? Give everyone time to cool down?" "Robert, are you suggesting I avoid accountability for my actions?" "That would be highly irregular. I'm suggesting maybe we all have things we'd rather keep private." There it was. The fear she'd been counting on. "Are you threatening me, Robert?" No, of course not. Look, maybe we should all be more understanding of each other's situations. You know what I mean." Karen smiled into the phone. "I know exactly what you mean. I'll see you at 7. She hung up and returned to her files. The Hendersons weren't the only ones with secrets. At exactly 7 p.m., Karen walked into the Willowbrook Estates Community Center. The usual board meeting attendance of 12 had swelled to nearly 50 residents. Phones were out, recording everything. The local Facebook group had been buzzing all day about the HOA Karen pool scandal. Karen took her usual seat at the head of the long table, opened her laptop, and smiled at the crowd. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's emergency meeting. I'm sure you're all here because of the video that's been circulating." Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone in the back shouted, "Are you going to resign?" "That's an interesting question," Karen said, pulling up her first PowerPoint slide. "But before we discuss my future, I think we should address some other matters that have come to my attention." The slide showed a photograph of Dave Thornton's deck, taken from Google Earth with the date stamp clearly visible. "David, I noticed your deck is quite lovely. When did you say you got the permit for that extension?" Dave's face went white. This isn't about my deck, Karen. Actually, it's about following the rules. Something I've apparently been too lenient about." Karen clicked to the next slide. Melissa's daughter's food truck parked in the driveway. "Melissa, remind me about our commercial vehicle policy." "Karen, stop this." Melissa's voice was barely a whisper. But Karen was just getting started. Click. The Hendersons' pool house, with architectural drawings side by side. Click. Mrs. Chen's clearly visible business signage in her front window, a violation of the home-based business regulations. Click. The Patel's fence that exceeded height restrictions by 6 inches. "You see," Karen said, her voice carrying across the silent room, "for 15 years, I've used discretion. I've allowed minor violations to slide in the interest of community harmony. I've been understanding." She closed the laptop and looked directly at the crowd. "But it seems my neighbors prefer strict adherence to the rules. So let's discuss rules. David, your unpermitted deck is a $500 daily fine until it's brought into compliance. Melissa, commercial vehicles are $200 per incident. I count 17 documented violations." "You can't do this," Dave said, standing up. "You're the one who broke the rules." "Yes, I did." Karen's admission sent a shock through the room. "I dumped leaves in our community pool at 11:42 p.m. on Tuesday. It was childish, petty, and completely against regulations. I'm prepared to pay the standard fine of $150 for improper disposal of organic waste. She paused, letting that sink in. However, since we're apparently conducting a thorough review of rule compliance, I've prepared violation notices for 37 households. The total fines come to approximately $47,000. The room erupted. Voices rose in anger and panic. Karen sat calmly at the head of the table, watching her neighbors turn on each other. "This is insane," someone shouted. "She's lost her mind. We can't let her do this." Karen stood, and somehow her presence commanded silence. "The vote of no confidence is your right as residents. But remember, I've been protecting you from yourselves for 15 years. Without me, who's going to decide which rules matter and which ones don't? Who's going to use discretion? Who's going to keep the lawyers and the city inspectors from making your lives miserable?" She gathered her papers and walked toward the door. "The vote is scheduled for next week. Choose carefully. Because if you remove me, you'll get exactly what you're asking for. Someone who follows every rule, every time, without exception." At the door, she turned back. "Oh, and Robert. About that pool house of yours. I scheduled a city inspection for Monday morning. I thought you'd want to know." Karen's phone had been ringing nonstop for 3 days. She'd stopped answering after the 15th. "Please can we talk" call from various neighbors. Let them sweat. Let them realize what they'd unleashed. She was in her garden, deadheading her prize roses, when she heard the footsteps on her front walk. Through the gate, she could see a delegation approaching. Dave, Melissa, Robert Henderson, and surprisingly, Mrs. Chen, the woman whose security camera had started this whole mess. "Karen?" Dave's voice was tentative. "We'd like to talk." She didn't look up from her roses. "About the vote?" Melissa said. "We want to withdraw it." Now Karen looked up, her pruning shears still in hand. "Withdraw it? How interesting. What changed your minds?" Robert stepped forward, his usually smug expression replaced by something like desperation. "The city inspector came yesterday, about the pool house. He found other things." "What kinds of things?" "Electrical work that wasn't up to code. Septic issues. He shut down 3 properties for safety violations." Robert's voice cracked. "My pool house has to be torn down." Mrs. Chen spoke for the first time. "My home business license was revoked. 20 years of custom alterations, gone because of a sign in my window." Karen nodded sympathetically. "I imagine that's quite difficult." "The thing is," Dave said, "we realized something. When you were in charge, these things didn't happen. You found ways to work with people." "I used discretion," Karen corrected. "Something I was apparently wrong to do." "No," Melissa said quickly. "You were right. The neighborhood needs someone who understands that rules aren't everything." Karen set down her pruning shears and really looked at them. Dave looked like he hadn't slept in days. Melissa was clutching a tissue. Even Robert, who'd been so cocky on the phone, seemed diminished. "You want me to stay on as president," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," they said in unison. "And in return." Robert stepped forward. "The pool parties. We'll keep them to weekends only. Reasonable hours. We should have been more considerate." "And the leaves in the pool?" Karen asked. My moment of, shall we call it, poor judgment. Dave actually smiled. "What leaves? I don't remember any leaves." Karen felt something unexpected, a flutter of affection for these people she'd spent so many years managing. They were infuriating, rule-breaking, property value-threatening neighbors. But they were her neighbors. "There's something you should know," she said finally, "about why I did it." She told them about the sleepless nights, the ignored noise complaints, the feeling that her authority was eroding, but also about the deeper truth, that she'd been HOA president for so long, she'd forgotten how to be anything else. "When I saw that pool, perfectly clean and peaceful, and thought about how you'd been disrupting that peace," she shrugged. "I wanted you to clean up a mess for once. I wanted you to understand what it feels like when someone destroys something you care about." "The pool," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "It's not just about the pool, is it?" Karen's composure finally cracked. I've given 15 years to this neighborhood. I've missed family dinners to attend board meetings. I've made enemies out of people who used to be friends. I've become the woman everyone loves to hate, all to keep property values up and maintain order. And sometimes you just wanted to make a mess, Melissa finished. Yes. They stood in silence in Karen's perfect garden, surrounded by her perfectly pruned roses and her perfectly edged walkways. What if, Dave said slowly, what if we found you some help? Shared the responsibility a little?